We are in our question and answer phase. So does anyone have any questions? I was sent a question in advance by someone, but they haven't logged in yet. So I don't remember what the question was, so I'll have to wait for them. And since no one's saying anything, I'll say something. Um, I sent out last month in the general announcement email the link to the Apple ad that they produced in 1984 to introduce the Macintosh. Did any of you remember having seen that during the Super Bowl back in 1984? I didn't because I wasn't in this country. I was living in Japan, and I didn't see the ad until several years later when I was president of the San Diego Macintosh Group, which was quite a bit larger. It had over 5,000 members. Apple gave me a CD with the ad on it, and that was the first time I saw it. And they were making fun of me for not having seen it. And I pointed out that I was living in Japan and they don't show the Super Bowl in Japan. And the people at Apple were surprised that they wouldn't show the Super Bowl in Japan in 1984. I got the distinct impression that none of them had ever been to Japan because why would they? But that particular ad is, among other things, indicative of what Apple was trying to do. Prior to this time, when you used a computer, you typed in commands and you had to know what the commands were. There was no hints on what the commands were, how they worked. And with the Mac, you didn't really have to type in any commands at all. You just selected things off a menu and you drug your mouse around and did things, but there were no commands that you had to type in. And I was used to typing in commands and really wasn't sure if I wanted a Macintosh, but the chief meteorologist for the Seventh Fleet, the US Navy Seventh Fleet, is headquartered in Yokosuka, Japan. He did a demonstration of a Mac that he bought in Hong Kong the day that they were announced. And he happened to be in Hong Kong and he bought it. And his daughter's name was Emily. And I happened to know this because he was trying to do something and there was only one disk drive. So sometimes it would pop out the old disk and you had to put in another disk in order to do certain things. And so he was trying to do something and it popped out the disk and it asked for Emily's disk. And he didn't have Emily's disk, but it asked for it by name, say, please insert Emily's disk. And that was the end of the demonstration because you couldn't go any further because he didn't have Emily's disk. But it also convinced me that I wanted a Mac because about 2 months earlier than this, I had destroyed a program using my command-based computer. I had a TRS-80, but the TRS-80 was made by Radio Shack, and it used its own operating system called TRS-80 DOS for disk operating system. But it was also running something called CP/M, which is a completely different operating system, but they could both run on the same machine. And in the TRS-80, you copy from to, which is also what you do on the Mac. You copy from to. But in CP/M, you copy to from. And I had ordered a CP/M program, and I forgot that in a CP/M, it was going the wrong way. And I copied a blank disk on top of this program that I had waited 3 months to be shipped from the United States, and I destroyed it. And I was thinking, if I'd had a Mac, that wouldn't have happened. So that was what convinced me to buy a Mac. And I went down to Akihabara in Tokyo the day that they released them in Japan, and I bought one. I bought the model that they had set up for display because they were going to do a live TV broadcast. And since that was the one that was set up, I bought it. And they were very sad, and I didn't realize why until after they handed me the box. They said, well, we'd set it up for a commercial. Oh, well, I've got it now, and so I went back to back home with this Mac. But I bought the very first Mac sold in Japan, completely by accident. Well, no, I went there to see it, so it wasn't too much of an accident, but um, and that was long before I saw the commercial. But the commercial it illustrated um, Apple's idea that computers, if they're just calculating devices, and you have to memorize a whole bunch of commands, were not good devices. And so Steve Jobs said that the Macintosh was not a computer, it was an appliance for the mind. And in the original packaging, they talked about it being a mind appliance, which today would probably creep people out. But at the time, it seemed like a good idea. Anybody have any questions?
I have one. There was just an update from Apple called 23.1, 23.3.1A. And do you know what that was about? They said some kind of security emergency
When did you see that?
today, about 30 minutes ago. And
Uh,
it was called background improvement security. And you had to find this. It wasn't on general software update. It was in the privacy and security section, and you scroll down to background improvement, and there was the update to install. And then it was called 23.3.1A.
I do not see that. What device was this on?
The iOS and macOS and iPadOS, all three, not TV, but the iPad, iPhone, and your laptop macOS. And
I
they said install it immediately because there was some security issue.
I would probably not do that because the software update's not showing that, and that's the only place that you should see that kind of update. So I'm suspicious. I I might be incorrectly suspicious, but
Well, no, it was in my security. When I looked in privacy and security, there was the update and it said install.
in
Uh,
in well, except that it shouldn't be in privacy and security. It should be
Yeah,
just
I
under.
know that was a very weird place for it to show up.
Yeah,
But on both the iPad and my iPhone and my laptop, all three. And I'm now running 26.3.1A. And
yeah.
if you look on your privacy security, you'll see it. Um,
Well, I'm looking at and security on my Mac right this second, and I do not see
no,
anything.
scroll down to background improvements, all the way to the bottom, towards the bottom.
Background improvements.
All right, and then select that, and then you'll see
Ah, okay.
23.3, 26.3.1A, and it
I
says install immediately.
Yeah, well, I'm still going to hold off on this until I know more. Um,
Yeah, I was wondering what that was all about.
well, I'm just by nature, I'm very paranoid, and sometimes paranoia means um, don't following the rules. I know my rule was install updates, but the update process you're supposed to go through is through the security update process, and it's not there. So I'm going to investigate this. The Is an example of something that happened once upon a time. The um, federal government ordered the entire government to install a Windows update on every machine that the government had. And I was ordered it to install it on all the machines I was responsible for, which were 700 Macs. And I said I could not install a Windows update on Macs. And I was told in no uncertain terms by the CIO, who really was an idiot, that I had to. So what I did is I followed the rule. I created this file and I told everybody to put this on your Mac. It won't do anything, but I can say that it was distributed to everybody. And so we had this like software updates back then were small. It was like 3 gigs, and not 3 gigs. It was about 3 megabytes. So every single Mac that I had this 3 megabyte file on it, and it just sat there for about 3 days. And he came back with a very sheepish, "Oh, never mind," and we threw it away. But I tend to I tend to make sure that it's through the standard process. So I will
Well,
I'll look at that after the meeting because I'm
um,
curious about this.
I have one thing on my wife's iPhone. I had not updated it to 26.3.1. It only had 26.3. But when I looked at the normal place for general software update, it said update 26.3.1a, and that was through the general software update. But that's because I had not used 26.3.1 on her phone, only
Yeah.
26.3. And so,
Well,
but when I did it on her phone, it went through the normal channel. But on mine, I had 26.3.1 already. And to do the A, you had to go through the background improvement
okay.
button.
I'll take that under advisement. I'm just not going to do a software update before the meeting. So, but
Oh, okay.
that is very unusual.
Yeah, it
And
is. It's very unusual. And to have it as an A in a letter instead of a number was weird.
yeah, that is strange.
But when I look at my Mac, it says updated to 26.3.1A, and the A is in parentheses.
Okay. Well, again,
That's
um,
the new thing they just implemented for background
Background
security
improvement,
updates. Yeah,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
yeah. Well,
I mean, the A thing.
Yeah,
That's what
the
that
A,
is.
right? Yeah, I
I'll
did it on mine.
I will look at that after the meeting. And I'll also probably write to them and say, "What the heck are you guys doing?"
Yeah.
Um, I know several of these security people at Apple, and I give them a bad time. I still have a machine that that is not doing a security thing the way I want it to, but their the lame excuse they gave me is, "Oh, that's an old Intel machine." Yeah, well, too bad. It's still not doing what I want it to do. So, um, such is life. Any other questions? Mr. Lockwood, you sent me a question which I've completely forgotten about. So what was the question?
It had to do with the iPhone and with maximizing storage where you can
Oh, yes.
store. Yeah, and my question was, if you turn that on and then the if you have space, apparently it's got something it doesn't automatically, if I'm reading Apple's description right, it doesn't automatically store everything at low resolution on your machine, but it could. My question was, if that's turned on and you want to email a full resolution version of a photo to somebody, how do you do that?
Okay. To give you some background, that may not seem relevant, but it's actually has a lot to do with this. I had a friend who bought an iPhone, and they were going on a trip to Europe, and they bought one that didn't have a heck of a lot of storage on it. It was back in the days when they were selling them with like 32 gigs or 64 gigs or something like that. And so what she did, she set it at the lowest possible resolution so that every time she took a picture, it was at low resolution. When she came back from Europe after spending, I don't know how long there, she came out with all these photographs that by our standards today were about the size of postage stamps. They were about 800 pixels across. And by comparison, the iPhone today will shoot one at 4,000 pixels, 40, more than 4,000 pixels across, and larger depending upon the model. And she wanted to know how she could get them larger. And I said, well, she couldn't because she'd set it at a small um, resolution because she didn't want to use up a lot of space. So she came back with a lot of space and a lot of really small photographs. I recommend that people shoot things at the highest possible resolution. And I have an article up on the Smug site saying how to do that with the new iPhone 17, which it applies to older ones as well, but set it at the highest possible resolution. Because when it comes to taking photographs in movies, you can throw away pixels by shrinking the photograph, but you really can't add them. If you add pixels to a small resolution thing, what you're doing is just making a larger image that's grainy, because it's just repeating the same thing over and over again. So if you don't want grainy, shoot at the highest possible resolution. Well, the question is, how do you store that on a machine that may not have that much space? It requires a couple things to do. First of all, have an iCloud plan that's not set at the basic level. The free one gives you 5 gigs of space. Well, my new iPhone 17 Pro Max, or whatever the heck it is, each individual photograph is about 100 megs. I mean, they're large, because I shoot them not only at the highest resolution, but I also shoot them as what's called RAW. And with RAW, it's hard to explain exactly why, but RAW is a good thing when it's shooting images, because if the color is off, I can change the color without destroying the image. And the other thing is, when you're editing it, it leaves the raw image alone, and you're editing basically a virtual copy. So you never mess with the original. So I always shoot it raw. And so these things are over 100 megabytes per photograph. Well, that takes up a lot of space, but I bought a lot of space. But say you didn't have a lot. If you have a non-free account, one that you're actually paying for, you'll get, I don't remember what the smallest measure is. You can get 50 gigs, 100 gigs, 200 gigs, terabytes. You can get a huge amount of space. So say if you have 500 megs or even 100 gigs of space, if you say you want to minimize space on your phone checks with iCloud, says, oh, okay, I can send all the high resolution stuffs up to iCloud. And what I will do locally is have a high resolution, but not full resolution copy on the phone. And then if you want to look at your phone's only a couple thousand pixels across. It's not as if you can have this massive thing on that tiny little screen. It'll still look good on your phone. And if you want to download the high resolution onto your desktop machine, which you should, you can do so. If you tell it to sync up to iCloud, and iCloud will pull down, your computer will pull down from iCloud the full resolution versions, and you can have them on your machine, and you can edit them and do whatever you want to. Well, his question is, if you want to send a full resolution copy to someone, what does it do? Well, there are a couple things to think about. One is, if you've got a full resolution, even if it's a JPEG and it's not a raw image, the JPEG might be too big for email. It's very possible. A lot of people have small email accounts. For example, if you are with Verizon, the standard size of an attachment, if it's over a megabyte in size, over a megabyte, which isn't very big, Verizon will scold you and say, hey, that's kind of big. Depending upon what kind of plan you have, it might go up to 10 megs, but it's still possible to send a picture larger than what Verizon will accept. So that's one limitation. So what do? You can send the thing anyway, and it's at that point it's a match between what you have on iCloud and what the other people can accept. And if they can accept a full resolution photograph, it'll download it from iCloud. If they can't, they'll get a smaller version, because that's all that their system will allow. So when you're sending it, keep in mind that if it's synced up to iCloud, it doesn't necessarily have to come from your computer, from your phone. It can come from iCloud. And you'll actually see that sometimes it'll say, give them a photo drop or something. I can't remember what the phraseology is, but what they're basically saying is, yeah, go ahead and send it this. It's not really going to come from your computer. It's really going to come from iCloud. And that's where, and I shouldn't do that. And that's where the full copy is. I had surgery on my shoulder, and this glove is on my hand to remind me not to raise my hand. And I forgot. And my shoulder told me about that. But anyway, that's the answer is if you have a paid version of iCloud, it can store the full resolution up there, and you really don't have to worry about not having full access on your phone. Because really on your phone, the limitation is the size of the screen. And the photographs are always going to be larger than the screen anyway. So don't worry about that. If you want to send somebody a full resolution, it's going to come from iCloud. It doesn't have to come off your phone. I realize that was a complicated answer, but I don't want you to get into the habit of this poor friend of mine who was shooting low resolution pictures in Europe because she was trying to save space. That's not the right answer.
Thank you.
Any other questions? It is after 7. Our president, Sabrina, wanted to say that she won't be here because she is working tonight. And our treasurer, Annalise, says that basically she wants to somebody else take over the job of treasurer. And Sabrina would like to do somebody else take over the job of president. The current Strait Macintosh user group started back in 2018 when Kathleen and Sabrina and Annalise and I went to a meeting, and the current leadership said that they were tired of running the user group and they wanted to shut it down. And we asked the members that were there if they really wanted to shut it down, and most of them said no, they did not. And Sabrina was elected president. I was elected vice president. Annalise was elected treasurer, and Kathleen was elected secretary. And that was in 2018. And my spouse has since died, and Annalise and Sabrina would like to not be officers anymore because they've been officers for a long time. So please give some thought, because I don't want to run the entire group just by myself. I would like some assistance. So please give that some thought between now and when we meet in April. The other thing is that I'm going to be out of town for a while, but as long as we don't have a particularly complicated program in April, I should be back in time to put something together. So give some thought as to what you want in April. I would suggest that we talk about something else other than an iPhone for at least for, meeting or two, because we've gone through a lot of iPhone stuff this is the 3rd month in a row we talked about the iPhone. Anything else before I start? Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I am recording, and I do have closed captioning running. It just reminded me that I should send you the attendance form, because that would be nice to have. I'm going to post the link in the chat window, and chat window, it's posted now. So if you could fill out that, it would be useful. And now I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to share that screen. And I'm going to move this out of the way. Okay, can you see the screen now? Are you there?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay.
Lawrence, before you go on, the form says February 17th.
It does? Well, shame on that.
I sent mine in anyway.
Yeah, well, fill it out anyway. Maybe I made a typo. Turn on recording, turn on closed captioning. Remember to sign out. Sounds good. I'm going to repeat these references that I mentioned before. If you ever need help with your iPad, your Mac, or your iPhone, there is a tips application on your device, and you can use the search bar within it to find out what it is you don't know. There are also these books from Take Control Books that are, because they're electronic, they're easily searchable, and you can find out what you need from them. And this is a new book. It's not specific to the iPhone, just came out. It's supposed to come out on April 1st, called Apple, the First 50 Years. It's 600 plus pages long. It's illustrated in color. It's available in hardback, paperback, or as an ebook. And this is a screenshot from my Kindle of, what is it? Page something. But it's basically a history of Apple, but it talks about a lot about the design and has a lot of interesting tidbits. And this is a screenshot from the Super Bowl commercial that I was talking about. Things you can do with an iPhone. You can take strange pictures. This is an advertisement for Vistaprint. And if you look at the cup, it shows just a tremendous amount of care and craftsmanship and makes you really want to go out and buy something from Vistaprint. And I took this photo today and I sent it to one of my relatives, and they made the joke that, actually that's the second one. They said that the house was tilted and I should straighten it out. So I straightened it out and sent them back this. That's not particularly useful, but it did amuse me. You can make fun of AI, such as this particular cartoon that's talking about an AI that all you have to do is feed it 10 baby giraffes a day. And they said, does it answer the questions correctly? And oh no, it doesn't do that. But small price to pay for AI. And you can see things like this. This is an actual National Park Service tweet saying that trails often look flatter on the map, which is not only good advice, but also quite funny. And here we have a Venn diagram showing the intersection between cats and printers. And they have a lot in common. They're moody, unreliable, spend lots of time self-cleaning, demand feeding when container is full, ignores requests. Other things you can do that are more useful. The iPhone and the Apple Watch have, the more recent ones, have crash alerts. If they detect that you've been in a serious car crash, it will wait, it'll sound an alarm for 10 seconds. And if you're able to, you can turn off the alert. If you don't, it'll send a 911 call with your location after a 30-second countdown. So you do have an opportunity to stop the alert. But if you're in a crash, this is a really nice thing to have because it happens automatically. It doesn't require that you don't even have to be conscious. It'll send a notice of a crash. The first time this technology was used was in a crash in Washington State. They found a guy his car had gone down a ravine, and he was unconscious, but his phone alerted the State Patrol.
Is that the same as the fall detector?
No, this fall detector is second. The fall detector is
okay.
with the Apple Watch. The Apple Watch, and even though the Apple Watch is not an iPhone, you actually set this up on your iPhone and it works with your iPhone and so on and so forth. The Apple Watch has a fall detector, which if you are older than about 50, it's a good idea to have something like this. The fall detector, if you fall, it'll come up with it'll come up with alert. It'll give you a chance to cancel the alert. If you are not able to cancel the alert, it'll also send a message to the 911 operator. And again, the first time this happened, was put to use was in Washington State. A guy was going through the Cascades and he fell down a hillside off of a trail, and his watch alerted to the 911. In his case, because it wasn't a car, it was a little bit harder to see, and it took him a couple hours. But again, he did this completely without his help. So it's a really nice thing to have. Other things you can do in messages, you have the ability to send check-in messages when you reach a particular point. And you do this with messages, down where that little plus symbol is, you can add a bunch of stuff to your messages. And one of them is a check-in. And in the check-in, you can specify if you're driving, if you're in transit, if you're walking. It gives an estimated time of when you're going to get there, and say when you arrive, it'll check in. Now, why this is useful, it's useful if you're trying to meet someone. It tells you if they're in a crowded venue, it'll say, hey, I'm here someplace. The other thing that it's useful for is if you're not certain about your trip and you want somebody to be looking for you. So it's a very useful thing to have. One limitation with this, it really works only if you and the recipient have an iPhone. If they have an Android phone, I'm not sure how reliable this is. Other things you can do are emergency notifications. I have all the notifications turned on my phone. I have it turned on for Amber Alerts, emergency alerts, public safety alerts, test alerts. And if you look under, there's a section here, it's called Enhanced Safety Alerts. If you look at that, you can see you can turn on earthquake alerts, not a bad thing for us to have around here, and imminent threat alerts. So it's all kinds of things that your phone, without any intervention on your part, can tell you what's happening around you and alert you to it. The only time this ever really bothered me is that I had an Amber Alert for something that took place at Moses Lake, and it came in at 2 in the morning, and that kind of torqued me off. But I complained to the Washington State Patrol, and they said lots of people had complained, and they've refined their system since then. You can also send an SOS. Now, this is something that you trigger. It's not something that happens automatically. But if you push the volume up button and the power button on the opposite side, and you hold it for a bit and then release it, it will trigger an SOS, which again sends something to 911. Why does it do this? It's doing this if you think you're being carjacked or hijacked or threatened or something. It'll just send this, and it doesn't require anything on your else on your side. It also will, this is another way to turn it on a watch, because you can do the same thing from a watch. With the watch, you push the 2 buttons that it has rather than just one. And it'll also turn on the severe crash alert and the fall detection alert. So this is another way of contacting 911. But this is one that you trigger on demand as you feel necessary. And in SQUIM, it's probably not as necessary as in some places of the world, but it's still a nice thing to know that it can do that. There are some things, because your iPhone does so much, it's nice to know that there are things that you can keep it from doing. And a lot of this you find under privacy and security. This is a screenshot from my phone, and you'll notice that it says that there are 2 applications I have that are always showing location, and 81 that only use it when I'm using the app in question. And there's 1 that allows tracking. So what exactly does this mean? A lot of games, as an example, want to know your location. Well, if you're playing a game, you probably don't want anybody to know where you are. It's not really necessary to play the game. And they'll do the same thing with tracking. They try tracking your activity. What are you looking at? If you stopped using the app and did something else. a lot of tracking activity. You'll notice I only have tracking on one thing. That one thing is a speed test that I use on the internet. And the reason why I turn on tracking for that is that if you're doing an internet speed test, it really does kind of need to know what it is you're doing. So I turn on tracking for the speed test. The two that I allow to location services always are Apple Maps and Google Maps. And that's because when I turn on maps and I want to get direction for someplace I'm going, I don't want to have to remember to turn on location services. I just want it to always be on. So that's how I have it set up. But this privacy and security pane will allow you to go through all your apps and turn everything off or everything on, or customize it to your desires. If you scroll down a bit, you can come to the section where it tells you about block contacts. If I get spam from particular numbers, I block them. And so I block unknowns, I block things that are known. I don't remember what 304 is, but it's some company that I just don't want to ever hear from them again. And if you scroll down again in privacy, you'll come to this safety check, which will allow you to do kind of blanket management of a whole bunch of things at once. You'll notice that one is emergency reset, which resets the access for everything. And you would do that if you think your machine, your phone is compromised, or if it was out of your control for a while, you left it in a restaurant and came back a day later, and you just want to make sure that nobody was messing with it. So it's got that safety check feature. If you scroll down in privacy and security, you'll also see that you can get a privacy report, and the privacy report will give you a report on what everything is doing. In this case, this is a screen dump from my phone. It says that I used the weather app 50 seconds ago, and 56 seconds ago, a message came in, and 56 seconds ago, my photos synced, and 57 seconds ago, it talked to USA Drive Safe. USAA is an insurance company, and if I run this app on my phone and it finds out that I'm using my phone while I'm driving, I don't get a discount. So I run it because I want the discount. And I used FAP Maps 4 minutes ago, and so on and so forth. And it also tells you the times that you've been using things. And you see that I look at the AP News fairly often, and Google Home I use it for cameras and smoke detectors and things in my house. Things that you should do if you have an Apple iPhone, and if you haven't set it up, you should set up the medical ID, and you do that using the medical app, which is the one that's shaped like a heart. And you go in there and you tell it your name, and it's your real name, your real age, your real weight, so on and so forth. And it keeps track of a lot of things that you do, like the number of steps you do a day, and your heart rate. If you have something like an Apple Watch that can detect that, does all kinds of things. You can also sync it to your medical record. And I've done that. And the reason why I do that is I go to Olympic Medical Physicians, and I have a MyChart account. And the MyCharts quite often, especially things like blood tests, it comes back with a bunch of stuff and it says, this is this and this is that. And I have no idea what it means. The raw data on MyChart doesn't really tell me, but within the Apple Health app, it'll actually give an explanation and give you graphs of changes over time, and it tells you what that particular test is looking for. So it's really, really handy. It's also where you set up the medical ID stuff. The medical ID wants to know the name of your spouse, wants to know, and if you're a child, your mother and your father, and a bunch of emergency contacts. And I'll show you in a second something else that it does that's handy. But the medical ID is good for just your own tracking your own health, but it's also good if you are injured. And I will show you that in a second. If there is an emergency, these you see on the left the iPhone, you see on the right the Apple Watch. These are things that will appear on those devices if you're unconscious and a healthcare or emergency services person comes and triggers it on your iPhone. And I'm going to unshare my screen for a second so I can show you what that looks like. And all I need is the right. Gonna share the screen again. If I can figure out. Can you see that on the screen? This is what happens. If the medical personnel come along, they press the side buttons on the machine, it pops up this thing for medical ID, and it starts scrolling from the bottom. I cut it off there because I don't want you to show all that. I don't want you to see all that stuff, but I don't want you to know about all my various problems. But it's they don't have to, they're not getting into the phone. The only thing they can see is that medical ID. It's sort of like the little wristbands that people used to carry around on their wrists. And this gives them a lot more information than those wristbands did. So. Other things you can do is you can set up stolen device protection, and I'll let you play with this and figure out how to what it does. It says that it adds an extra layer of security when your phone's something other than where it's normally at, and you can find this under the privacy section. Something else you can do, and you can do this now with the iPhone. You don't need to purchase any extra app. You can record a phone call. And to do that, if you look on the right-hand display, there's a couple A's. It says AA, and then right next to it are some concentric circles that look sort of like a target. That is the record call button. And these are available from Control Center. So you can be doing anything on the phone, go up to the upper left, upper right, pull it down, and start recording a phone call. Well, actually, that records the screen. That does not record the phone call. So never mind. That records the screen. But I'm going to show you what that looks like if you're recording a call. And as I recall, it's not going to create any noise, which is a problem. So this thing that looks like a target down here, that is the record call. That is the record screen. So I tell it, it's going to say record the screen. I'm going to use Siri to make the phone call, and I do that by pressing the side button, and it triggers Siri. And what I'm saying to Siri is, I'm telling it to call the U.S. Naval Observatory. The U.S. Naval Observatory is in my phone book, otherwise it wouldn't work. It'll call the U.S. Naval Observatory, and I'll get they'll answer the phone. After they answer the phone, I can then start recording the call. You'll notice that you won't hear anything for quite a while, but eventually you hear what it's saying. And that's because when it says it's recording the call, the very first thing it does is it says out loud, this call is being recorded so that the other party can hear it. And then after it makes that announcement, then it starts recording the call. You'll also hear why I'm calling the U.S. Naval Observatory when you do this. At least I hope you figure it out. Here I'm asking Siri to call the U.S. Naval Observatory, and it says calling the U.S. Naval Observatory, and the U.S. Naval Observatory comes up. I set it on speaker so I can hear it. Then I go down to this button down below that says more, and eventually it'll show you that I'm pressing the more button, and I say call recording, and this call would be recorded. It's actually saying that, and now it's recording the call. And you're not hearing anything because it's recording it and it's putting it into my notes application. Why does it put it into notes? Notes, among other things, can transcribe audio recordings. So it'll do voice transcriptions if you dump an audio file into it. Now, this is what it sounds like, and I hope you'll be able to hear it as soon as I can find out where it is.
U.S. Naval Observatory Master Clock at the tone Eastern Daylight Time, 13 hours, 34 minutes exactly. Universal Time, 17 hours, 34 minutes, 5 seconds.
Now, any idea why I called the master clock? I called the master clock because I knew it wouldn't refuse my call if I was going to record it. So it didn't require another human being, but I got to talk to something. I got to talk to this recorded voice. The U.S. Naval Observatory is in Washington, D.C., and it's an atomic clock that, among other things, your computer and your iPhone and everything else on the planet syncs up to. And it does it in universal time, which is Greenwich Mean Time. And it then just adds or subtracts hours depending upon where you are on the planet. So that's why I call the master clock. It's because I didn't have to argue with it if I did it. So took a lot of screenshots to make this presentation. This is how you take a screenshot on an iPhone. You press the volume up button and the side button at the same time and you release them. Don't hold them forever, but just quickly press them and it takes a screenshot. And you can do the same thing on the watch. If you press both buttons, there's a crown button and then there's a side button. If you press them both at the same time, it'll take a screenshot of what's on the watch. And these are two screenshots that I shot of the watch. One, the watch being a watch, and the other one showing the tides at Squim Bay. I have an app on my watch that shows me on the watch what the tides are at Squim Bay, because I like to take photographs of the bay when it's got water in it and not when it's just mud flaps. And that was the wrong button to press. Why is it doing that? Huh? Oh, it's doing that because that's the last slide. Okay, that's a good reason for it to do that. And I've only used half an hour. So stop doing that. I went through that a lot faster than I thought I was going to. Any questions? A question you should have is, how do I make a call on this using Siri? There are a couple of requirements. You can only make a call using Siri if that person is in your address book. So if they're not in your address book, you can't call them. The other question you should have is, what if you have, my spouse's name was Kathleen. There are Kathys, Kathleen's, Catherines, all kinds of different variations of Kathleen out there. In order for me to be specific, there are two things you can do. One is if you put that person in your favorites lists, then it'll appear, if you look at the address book for the phone, your favorites are the people that you call all the time. And it's not the same as your contacts, which are everybody else on the planet. If they're in your favorites, Kathleen's address in favorites was Kathleen. So I say, if I said call Kathleen, it would call Kathleen. If Kathleen has two numbers, and at one point Kathleen had 5, because she was that kind of person, I also have to say which phone I wanted to call. So if I said call Kathleen iPhone, I don't have to specify anything other than make sure that her contact says iPhone rather than just mobile phone or cell phone or desk phone or work phone. Has to say iPhone, which is one of the choices. I say call Kathleen iPhone, it would call her iPhone. If it was somebody else, somebody named Rick, and I had 3 Ricks, then I have to have the last name as well. And again, if they have multiple phone numbers, it'll ask me which one to call. And I mention this because if you can use your phone with your car in CarPlay, it's a really easy way to call people with your hands on the wheel and you're not distracted. You just say, you tell a certain robotic voice to call Kathleen and it'll call Kathleen. You have to be kind of think through in advance what Siri will ask in order to avoid a bunch of back and forth, but it works extremely well. With CarPlay, it also works with directions. So you can say, direct, it, you can say, I think, you can say directions to a hospital in Port Angeles. If you're distinctive enough, you can say Olympic Medical, I don't remember what the Olympic Medical Hospital, Port Angeles. It'll give you directions there. But if you say directions to Chipotle, it'll say, do you want Paulsbo? Do you want Port Angeles? Do you want Victoria? And you don't want to get into that argument with your computer while you're going down the highway at 50 miles an hour. So just kind of think through in advance what it is you want to do, and it's fairly smooth. And if you've never used, if you have a car that's capable of using CarPlay, I highly recommend that you give it a shot. CarPlay comes in 2 versions, depending upon how old your car is. My car came with CarPlay, but it was wired CarPlay. So you have to plug the phone in every time. And I found out I didn't like that because several times I would plug the phone into the car in order to use it in the car, and I'd forget it was plugged into in the car, and I'd go into the bank, and the bank says, could you give me your blah, blah, blah? And I look for my phone, and I can't do that because it's in the car. So what I did is I got a dongle off of Amazon that plugs in, and it sets up a Bluetooth connection between the car and the phone so that the car can be sitting in my pocket and still work with CarPlay. The dongles run around 50, 60 bucks. And in my case, it was well worth it. The other advantage is that if you had the CarPlay, if you had your phone plugged into the car and you got out of the car, some people would come along, see that there was an iPhone in the car, break into the car. It wouldn't do them any good because mine's password protected and they could never use it, but I'd still be stuck with a several $100 bill because of the damage they did to the car. So not having it visible in the car because it's in my pocket was a good thing. Any questions? Is there anything you wanted to do with your phone that I didn't cover in the past 3 months?
Apparently, if you have the Gemini app, you can't use it with the CarPlay. It won't put directions up on the map or anything like that.
CarPlay does work with Google Maps.
Yeah, oh yeah, but not Gemini. The app, there's an app called Gemini.
Yeah, but I think that Apple is waiting for their release of 26.4 or 5. Apple apparently has an agreement. It's been rumored, I don't really know, that they have an agreement with Google to have Google be the back end for some of the things that Siri does. I suspect that they're having a painful negotiation. On the one hand, Google wants access to Apple's 2 billion customers. But on the other hand, Apple doesn't want to give up their reputation for privacy and security. So Apple wants to send Google tokens, which don't tell them who's using the app, and Google probably wants more information. So they're probably arguing about that. But once they've figured that out, Apple will probably just incorporate it into Siri. So you wouldn't use the Gemini app. You'd probably just talk to Siri.
Will that be 26.4, 26.5, or 27?
I do not know. There is a lot of pressure for Apple to improve Apple Intelligence. And one way to do that is if it has Gemini in the back end, that's one way to do it. And there's an awful lot of angst in Google's camp because they want access to more customers. There's a big AI war going on right now. And of the ones that I've played with, the ones that I'm happiest with are Adobe, Firefly, and you have to be an Adobe customer to really use them usefully. And the other one is Gemini. But with Gemini, what I don't like is the fact that Gemini keeps the information that you type into it. If they have this agreement with Apple and Apple anonymizes the information, then I'd be much more comfortable playing with it. But in terms of Google, I've done some clever things. The illustrations that I've used for these last three presentations that I've stuck up on the website, those were done with Google Gemini. I described what I wanted and then it drew the picture. So the old man trying to eat an iPhone and the princess with the umbrella and the iPhone's raining down on top of her, those were done with Gemini.
Does it do better than the playground?
Yes, it does, because the playground gives you a fairly restrictive set of parameters because it's trying to make sure you don't give it anything confidential. So for example, I did I'm not going to show it to you because my daughter would kill me, but I have a picture of my granddaughter that I turned her into a Japanese princess. And my granddaughter, her father's English, her mother's an American. She doesn't look the least bit Japanese, but Playground turned her into a Japanese princess. And it did a really, really good job. But all of the computing for that was done on Playground. It never went to Apple. With Gemini, Gemini is capable of doing things that it's not limited to just what your iPad or iPhone or Mac can do. And Apple
So
has
did it look more like a Photoshop of the photo, or?
it looked like a computer generated image, a high quality computer. I mean, it had shading and everything, but it looked like my granddaughter as a Japanese princess. I even specified I wanted a blue kimono, and it gave her a blue kimono. So it was really quite well done. That's not to say that I disapprove of what Playground is doing, but that Playground is trying as much as possible to do 100% of the work on your phone or on your iPad or on your Mac. And because of that, it has access to your photos. So you say, use this photo, and it'll use that photo and turn it into something else, but it doesn't go beyond your computer. It's not sending it up to Apple, so Apple never has a copy of that photo. With Gemini, I think Apple wants those same kind of controls, but they also want you to be able to send anonymized data up there. So for example, if you had a plot to defraud Bank of America of $100 billion, I suggest that you not tell Gemini that. And even if Apple anonymizes it, probably not a good idea, because Apple might not say where it came from, but Google's still going to retain that information. So you have to be a little bit careful. But the way Apple is doing their computer security and privacy is very impressive. And in fact, I don't know if any of you have a Windows machine, but Microsoft is coming closer and closer to Apple's point of view because they've realized that Apple's reputation is built on being trustworthy, and people don't really trust Microsoft. So the only way to change that is to change how they approach privacy and security.
Yeah,
And
Hewlett Packard is now selling their laptops with Linux in it instead of Windows.
but Linux is actually more insecure than Windows. The reason why
Really?
it's more well, yes, because it requires a higher degree of understanding of systems engineering and system security in order for you to secure it. Linux is basically just it's a box of Tinker Toys and you put it together. And most people don't know how to build things with Tinker Toys.
So it's
Uh,
a true Unix workstation that requires an IT security manager.
Well, it's not really Unix, but it's Unix-like, yes. And if you don't know Unix, then you're not going to get very far.
Right,
Most you just can't get very far. The
right.
way in which I see that people use a lot on laptops is they use it with a shell over the top of it. So the shell looks like it's a GUI interface, and they push buttons and they don't necessarily have to know commands. But if they don't know how to update it, then they're going to be just constantly falling behind. And Linux doesn't do automatic updates.
Oh, it doesn't.
No. You can build something that'll do that, but no, it doesn't do automatic updates. Um, so, but Windows 11, as an example, adopted Apple's idea of having a security chip. So there's a security chip in Windows 11 laptops and desktops, and you can you can screw with Windows 11 so that it doesn't require it, but that's kind of stupid. It's better off just buy a Windows machine and make sure it's got a laptop. It's got this chip inside. So a lot of things that Apple has done over the years, Microsoft has come around to thinking that maybe it's a good idea. And that's what I think they're trying to do with their partnership with Google. But so far, all I've read is all I know are rumors. I haven't even talked to anyone high up level who might know more than I have. I just know what I read in the industry publications. Um, and it's a complicated thing because I've seen, as an example, this woman in Oklahoma um, uploaded a bunch of documentation on her divorce that she was contemplating into one of the AIs. And her husband, who was afraid that his wife was cheating on him, uploaded a bunch of stuff about it too, and came back with references to her divorce um, application. And that was not something she'd told him about because he was rather abusive. And that's one of the problems that you have with the current AIs, that they cannot tell a truth from a falsehood. If you upload War of the Worlds, which was written in the, what, 1910, something like that, it'll take it as gospel truth. So telling it the difference between what is real and what isn't real is sometimes difficult. What is private and what is not private, it has no sense. AIs have no concept of privacy at all. And the AI that we currently have isn't really even truly AI. It's called generative AI, which means you're using a computer to help you generate stuff, but it's not autonomous AI. It can't think and problem solve and find new problems on your own. People, we think of problems to solve. That's why when we're sitting in a doctor's office, we'll sit and play solitaire. Why? Because we're bored stiff, and so we find a problem that we can play with, even if it's solitaire or crossword puzzles and so on and so forth. AI cannot currently do that. So it's basically just regurgitating things that we already know. And it can do a good job at, if there's a service called Grammarly, that it's a free and a paid service. With Grammarly, it'll check your spelling if you're typing a message in a web browser. It'll check your spelling and check your grammar and say, that's the wrong tense and you need a comma there. Does a really good job of that. Pages does that. Microsoft Word does that. A lot of things do that. That is not really AI. And that's what most of the AI engines do today. They basically parse language. They really can't have a new thought. On the other hand, you can go into ChatGPT and tell it to write a limerick. Say, write me a limerick about leprechauns and toadstools, and it'll do it. Because it's just manipulating language and it knows the rules for language. And when it comes to rules for language, that's actually fairly clever. The Japanese were the ones who worked on this the longest, because the Japanese, to graduate from high school, you have to know 17,500 Chinese characters. Plus you have to know Romanji and hiragana and katakana, which are two different syllabaries written in Japanese characters. And you have to know Romanji. Romanji is Japanese in Roman characters. And reading a newspaper article, you'll see Chinese characters, hiragana, katakana, and Romanji. This places a huge burden on graduating from school in Japan, but it almost is impossible when it comes to computers and typewriters. If you go see a Japanese printing press, they were all manual because there were so many different character combinations. So Japan Telegraph and Telephone, Nippon Telegraph and Telephone, NTT, started working on natural language processing where you could talk to machines and it would transcribe them. They started doing work on this in the 70s. And when I was living in Japan in the 1980s, they gave some demonstrations and I was very impressed with them. And the reason why it was so important to the Japanese is that they didn't want to create a keyboard that had 20,000 keys on it. So if you just talk to the computer and it could turn it into written Japanese, that's a huge benefit for them. So they really pressed hard for this. In the United States, it was done by, trying to remember the name of the company. It was a gentleman who wanted to create systems for the blind so that the blind could use telephones and the blind could write, they could send things to fax machines and so on and so forth. And so he started doing natural language processing in English so that the blind could communicate with the outside world and get jobs and so on and so forth. And that was the big push in the United States. So what we're seeing today with what they call AI, it's really just a step above what they were doing in the 70s and 80s, because it's mostly with language processing. In my case, you'll notice what I've used it for are illustrations. Why? Because I'm a terrible artist. If I can describe it and it can make a picture, that's great. But that's still, I'm the one who's coming up with the problem, and I'm the one who's judging whether or not it's solved. It's not the computer. So it's not really intelligence. It's a tool. End of my editorial here.
So with that, I have a suggestion for next month. About a conversation about AI and how to get started in it. Some of us have no clue, and I really would like to learn a bit about it, but I don't know even how to get started. So I've messed around with GPT or Chat GPT a tiny bit, and Perplexity or something like that. I've messed around with that a little bit, but I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, I'll give that some thought. I'll give that some thought, but as some suggestions, if you're running Mac OS 26 or iOS 26 or iPad 26, there is something on your machine somewhere called Playground. And Playground is the image playground that Apple has set up. And just play around with that. All it can do is draw pictures. It comes up with some ideas on general things you can do, and you can then type in descriptions and play with that a bit. The other thing to try, because it's reasonably safe as long as you don't tell it, don't give it personal information, is use Google's Gemini. And to get access to that, just go into Google, into the search bar and say Google Gemini, and it'll take you to a page, and you can sit there and then and type out questions that you want it answered. But the real fun comes when you want it to draw something. And to do that, you say, draw me a photo of a dragon eating a banana. And just sit back and it'll give you different choices. How about this one? How about this one? How about this one? And you pick the one you want. And next thing you know, you have a picture of a dragon eating a banana. And the reason why I suggest Gemini is that it can handle text, which is nice. And it can also handle things like it'll make short video clips, and it can do photographs. Speaking of which, Pages is also hooked into Apple Intelligence. So if you wrote a letter to somebody and you think, well, that's kind of redundant and so on and so forth, you can ask Apple Pages to go through and summarize it or make it more concise, and it'll do that. If you're running a Mac OS 26 right now, you can set it up so that when before it shows you the message, it'll give you a little alert that's a summary of that message. And that's done with Apple Intelligence. And that's happening right now if you just set it up that way. If in settings, there's a whole section there for Apple Intelligence. It's its own little menu entry, and you just go flip what other switches you want. And it works with Pages, it works with Numbers, it works with Image Playground, it works with Siri, it works with a lot of stuff right now. It's really good on the text part. It's not so great on the other parts.
Very good. So that helps. I mean, one of the things I've tried to do is there's some apps associated with 3D printing that I want to be able to describe something and have it develop a model for me. And that does work. But say, for instance, you tell it you want it to draw a tugboat with heavy armament, like rockets and missiles and that sort of thing. It will, and it'll actually make a model out of it for you. But I haven't been able to figure out how to make the instructions more concise. In other words, after you tell it you want rockets and guns and things, and it's got an idea there, I want to specify I want 4 rockets. How do I add that on to what I've already done?
Yeah, the best way to do that with most of the AIs right now is just repeat what you said before, but you add in more adjectives and adverbs to say a red tugboat, like with my daughter. It's a photograph of my daughter. And I said I wanted her to be a Japanese princess, and it did something. I said, well, I want her to have a crown. Japanese princesses don't come with crowns, but if she's going to be a princess, my English granddaughter is going to think she's going to need a crown. So she has a crown, and wanted the gown that she was wearing to be blue. So I specified blue. So I just kept on refining my instructions until I got something that I liked.
Oh.
And that's how it works with all of these right now. You just ask for the same thing, but just getting more and more descriptive. And sometimes you'll ask for something, you say, that's terrible, and you just start over again. Because again, it's just a program someplace, and they can be remarkably stupid. We had a thermostat. It was thermostat for a building in Silver Spring, Maryland that I worked in. We didn't like the fact that you could be in different parts of the building. You could roast in one part and freeze in another. So they came up with a new thermostat system that was going to treat the entire building properly, and so on and so forth. One slight problem: it was made in Europe by a major German company, which you can probably guess just because it was a thermostat, and it was set for centigrade. And so the first thing they did is we want everything at 72 degrees. That was not a pleasant experience. You're 3/4 of the way to boiling at that point. And we didn't quite get to boiling, but it took them quite a while to figure out what was wrong. And it was hilarious because I worked at a science agency. Everything we did was run in Celsius, but the building engineer was not a scientist. So, um, they're just machines and they do what you tell them to do, even if it's stupid.
Yeah, everything having to do with 3D printing is, I mean, you can convert it to non-metric, but everything initially is done in metric. So, I mean, I even have whole sets of metric screws and nuts and all that stuff just for that stuff, so I don't have to convert and all that. So,
Well, there are 8 billion people on the planet, and only 300 million of them use English. So
yeah, yeah,
we're outvoted by humanity.
yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
I have a question about the iPhone.
Yes.
I know that you can, without an Apple Watch, you can use the iPhone when you go out to walk and it'll count your steps and all that sort of thing. Does it also generate a map? My wife has a Apple Watch with her iPhone, and she can walk or ride her bike or do whatever without the iPhone, and the watch will generate a map of where she went.
It's probably not the watch that's generating the map. It's probably an app like Strava can do that.
Nope, no apps like this, just Apple stuff.
I don't know of anything that Apple has that'll generate a map.
Well, I'm telling you that hers does.
Okay, I'll have to.
It's just part of the information that it has, how many steps you took, how far you went and all that. And then it has a map that traces where you went. And
Yeah,
you can blow it up and, it'll show you what streets you were on and all that, or what trails you were on and so forth. I just wondered if the iPhone without an Apple Watch did that.
um, I don't believe that the watch itself has that capability, but I will investigate. I
Okay.
do know that the app Strava, which is spelled, how is it spelled? Strava.
Yes.
It can track whether you're walking, riding a bike, riding an e-bike, running, skiing, all kinds of different activity, and it does draw a map. That's what Strava does, and it'll do that whether you have it as a phone in your pocket or you're using an Apple Watch. But I'm not aware of anything inherent to the watch that'll create a map. But like I said, I will do some investigation.
Now, I don't know if it's the watch or the phone, but wherever she goes with the watch without the phone, there's a map associated with it when you look at, when you look at what she did for the workout.
Yeah, well, if you have Strava on your watch, which I do, and I don't have my phone with me, sure enough, it'll track what I'm doing very accurately and give me a map and also tell me the elevation, whether I went up 200 feet,
Right,
and all
right.
kinds of stuff. But that's Strava doing that work. It's not the Apple Watch by itself.
Well, like I said, I don't know whether she doesn't have the phone with her, so the
Yeah, it
watch is
doesn't.
recording all that stuff. But
The watch is recording it because it has
Yeah,
an app on there doing
but
that
then you
work.
look in the Apple, the little Apple Health thing with the circles, the rings. You look in there for the summary, and there's a map as part of whatever the activity was, whether it was riding a bike or running or walking or canoeing but
Huh.
especially walking or hiking, it shows the map.
Well, I haven't seen that, but I will look because if it'll do that without using Strava, that's fine with me. I will investigate.
Okay, thank you.
Does Strava have a monthly thing?
You can get a free account, but it's really a trial account. That doesn't cost you anything, but it really wants you. Yes, they really try really hard to have you spend money. It depends upon, if you think about it, if you had a gym membership, it'd be a lot more than Strava. So it's not a bad deal because it'll tell you a lot more than the guy that you see at the gym.
Where on the Apple Watch do you access, that information that your wife gets? Which is the little icon that you would tap?
It's not, you don't, well, I don't know if you can access it on the Apple Watch or not. Somehow I've lost but when she comes back, I usually take the phone when I'm hiking while she's going somewhere else with only her watch. And then on the phone, you look at that. I don't know if it's called the health app, but it's the one with the three circles, like the
That's
activity rings.
activity.
Yeah, and it'll give a summary of how many steps she took, and what her heart rate was, all that kind of stuff. But also, there's a map.
I've been using the activity for years and I've never seen a map. But
It's
again,
there.
I will.
I agree with him because I've left my phone behind a couple of times when I went biking or walking, and I use the little workout button on my watch, and it does make a map. And when you come back and look at your phone, there's the map and the whole detail of your heart rate, your pace, all that stuff.
And it
Yeah.
has a map.
Yep.
Yeah, and she uses that workout thing where it counts down 3, 2, 1, and
Right.
starts the workout on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I will investigate. I wonder if this is the activity plus instead of just the regular activity. Anyway, I will investigate because this is a worthwhile question to investigate.
Okay.
Anything else?
So
Oh,
are we
well-
going to send you suggestions for next month, or are we going to do the rendering images in AI?
Why don't you send me suggestions anyway? Because again, I'm going on a trip between now and then, and I don't really know how much time I'll have to prepare.
Okay.
And I'll probably go with whatever's easy. Plus, we need a president and we need a treasurer. So think about volunteering. And with that,
I had one question,
yeah,
real quick, maybe. When you do a Google search using macOS 26 or iOS 26, does it actually use Gemini to give you the answer?
the Gemini can give a summary at the top unless you go through and tell it Gemini that you don't want it to do that. It'll give you a Gemini summary of what it found, but that's not really the search. The search results are below that.
But it does kind of give you a Gemini summary.
Yes. And I always ignore that because a lot of times the Gemini picks up what it has heard, which is not necessarily accurate, but it's been widely reported. As an example, there was a news story earlier this week about the USS Gerald Ford got hit by a missile and caught on fire. The USS Gerald Ford was not hit by a missile. It did catch on fire. The fire was in the laundry room. So part of that was true, but all of the initial reporting said that the fire was by a missile. So for a short period of time, Gemini was telling people that there was a fire aboard the Gerald Ford that was caused by a missile strike. And it took a while for Gemini to decide that that was not true. But it was widely reported. And again, Google is basically a search engine. It reports what people say. I won't give you the details, but there was a senator from Pennsylvania who had he had a history of saying really nasty things about homosexuals. And so a group of people got together and associated his last name with an obscene act. And Google started reporting that, oh yeah, that means, and it was this obscene act. So it's kind of crowdsourced revenge, I guess, because Google doesn't create this stuff. Google amasses it and says, okay, based upon the wealth of data I have, this must be the answer. As an example, Go into Google, ask it for pictures of an airplane, and it'll give you lots of pictures of an airplane. Google is absolutely, positively blind. Why is it coming back with those pictures of airplanes? It's because somebody took a photograph and said, this is, and describes the plane. And that's what the metadata on websites is done. It says, you know, this is a picture of this RC15 gauge for looking at pressure in a boiler. And so you look up the RC15 and there's a picture of it. Did Google know that? No. They described the picture and Google read the description and says, oh, this is attached to that photo, so that must be what it looks like. Google doesn't know what airplanes look like. Google doesn't know what whales look like. Google doesn't know what you look like. But you can go into Google, probably type in your name, and it'll come back with a photograph because somebody took a photograph of you and put it up on the web. Google searched that page and says, ah, that's what he looks like. If you type in my name in Google, you'll get my photo, but you'll also get a lot of other photos. A lot of those other photos were photos that I took because I'd been a magazine editor and newspaper editor, taking lots of photos, have my byline. So it comes back and says, oh yeah, this photograph of a bookshelf is Lawrence Charters because Lawrence Charters took that photo. So
Gotcha.
that's how it works. Anyway, have a nice night.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you. Have
Thank
a
you.
good night.